Good afternoon. We are live. I see attendees are jumping in the room. Thank you for joining us. Red News, RE Journals, Breaking Through the Disruption. I got to thank our sponsors. This is I think our 40th webinar we've done as a team. We are in the live event business, Red News and our other offices. We deeply miss seeing people in person and having panels in person. We're very happy that we were able to pivot, provide these webinars. They would not be possible without HKS, SIOR, Cadence McShane, Cedar Park, Texas, Angler Construction, and groups like that who have supported us while we're doing these webinars. And as we pivot back to live events, they'll be even more important. So thank you to these groups and to these speakers, because at least we're able to bring you the information you need and a few friendly, smiling faces, even though we can't be together. For those of you that don't know, Red News last year joined a bigger group, RE Journals. We now are 6 publications, and we cover 17 states, and we were on track to do 104 live events this year. We're still planning on doing those events. We're just pushed them off. But I think in addition to that, we're going to add about 50 webinars. So we're here. We're here for you across the Midwest, wherever you may be. If you're watching this online and you have connection issues, I'm showing our server is 5 bars, and all of our speakers have good connection. So it's probably on your end if you see something freeze up. So it's really easy to do that. To fix that, just hit that reconnect button that's at the top of your screen. It's a red button. That fixes 99% of the problem. So if I freeze up or you don't hear anything or it gets choppy, just push the button, reset it. If, on the other hand, that doesn't work, Google Chrome seems to be the best browser for a Webinar Jam, the software we use. If that doesn't work, just close everything out and open it back up again. And you can also view this on your phone, on your tablet, or any other device just by clicking the link that we sent you. So some people end up watching on their phone, and that's fine. There's a chat room to your right, so go there now. Enter your name and company so that we know who you are and you can network with other people. This is where you can also ask questions of the panelists. So I want you to be active in here asking questions as we kind of go through. To the panelists, I will tag them with a red Q when somebody asks a question, and I'll take that tag off when you've answered the question. So if you want to follow along and watch that room as well, go ahead. Polls, I will have a couple poll questions. You'll see that'll just probably pop up over your chat room. Once you answer the question, you can close it down and get back to the chat function. We do have our own YouTube channel. So if you go out and look at it, if you would subscribe, I have a bet going with my children that someday I'll get to 500 subscribers. So rejournals.com/videos/webinars will get you there. You can also see all of our upcoming webinars and our past ones there. Okay, this is us today. I'm excited for this. If you can't build it, they won't come. What the future holds for the construction industry. So COVID's disrupted everything, especially construction. And we've got a great panel of people here to walk us through what's going on. So I'm going to take this down. I'm going to turn it over to Will Hodges. He's going to start off by introducing himself, and he's the mastermind behind this panel. So Will, why don't you tell us where you work and kind of, we're in week 8 of COVID. What are you doing these days? What's a day in your life like?
Sure. Will Hodges. I'm with Cadence McShane. So a day in my life, it's kind of been a two-part equation, right? So we've gone from having a really chaotic first 3 or 4 weeks of this as a construction company. We were deemed an essential business. We had to keep our construction projects moving forward, but we also had to do that from a remote basis where we moved everybody outside of our offices and then moved into working from home. So that was very chaotic, and we were trying to work our way through that. The last, we've settled into a bit of a rhythm and a bit of routine, finding a new way to manage things. So, it's been pretty successful. I think it's, I would call it suboptimal in the long term, but in the short term, we've been able to keep things moving forward. So we're pretty excited about that. My role as the president, I've kind of been in the middle of all the issues that have occurred and trying to let teams handle that and manage that, but also kind of stepping in where needed. So it's been pretty fast and furious the last 8 weeks, but it's settled down a bit here in the last couple.
Excellent. Let's go to Tyler. I think that Jess might need to log out and log back in again. I don't know if y'all can see him, but I can't. So Tyler, to you.
Yeah, my name is Tyler Earl with Cadence as well. day in my life, it's interesting. As Will stated, it's day to day. So as these new challenges present themselves, whether it be at a project level or global level, it's been thinking on our feet quickly, making adjustments, as Will said, playing by the rules and keeping the jobs open to protect cash flow, et cetera, keeping us moving.
Excellent. Okay, we're going to go to Corbin.
Hi, I'm Corbin Van Arsdale. My unpaid job, the job doesn't pay anything, is I'm the mayor of Cedar Park, Texas, which is a suburb of Austin, population 80,000 people. And my paying job is I'm president and general counsel of a statewide construction association, the Associated General Contractors Texas Building Branch. But I'm here today in my capacity as mayor. And much to as what Will said, the first 4 weeks of this were quite a bit more insane than the what's since that time. But as mayor, ordinarily, we have a city manager that runs the city, and she still does run the city. But when this hit, it became, under the state statutes in Texas, it sort of thrust the mayor and the county judge and the governor into these almost like militaristic chain of command type situations where you're, having to make decisions and get involved in operations decisions, which is very unusual for the mayor position I'm in. And it was 20-hour days. It was the only time I've ever been on one conference call on my left ear and a different conference call on my right ear at the same time, sometimes 5 or 6 different times. At the same time, you're trying to text other people and email other people. I mean, it was wild. And just the mental and psychological aspects to that, it's going to take a while to work through all that. So it's been crazy, but it's definitely settling into more of a rhythm now.
Honestly, as a citizen, that's good to hear that you had 2 conference calls going on at the same time, because it feels like sometimes to us that nobody's talking to anybody and they're just kind of making it up as they go along. So yeah. I'm glad that you've had some experts in both ears, it sounds like. Jess, I had to turn your microphone off. I was getting a little bit of feedback. Why don't you pop it back on then, and you can do your intro.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jess Corrigan. I'm a principal at HKS Architects here in Dallas. And, we've been busy with all of this, trying to understand the future of the working world at the same time. We have our ongoing projects and work going on, as well as trying to understand what our office situation is going to look like moving forward.
I appreciate I didn't need to see myself that close up. The COVID beer. Jess and I are both the No Shave Club till the quarantine or the vaccine comes out. So I kind of like to take things in a little bit of chronological order, if that's okay, because I think people that are online are most interested in what things are going to be like going forward. We've all lived this now for 8 weeks, but I don't want to minimize that. I think we've got some questions here. Just maybe start with Will. What was, how did you get through the last 8 weeks, and what were some of the big surprises?
Yeah, so as I said earlier, I think it was just since construction, we were very blessed that construction was deemed an essential business. And so while a lot of the country has suffered with, being out of work and having those issues, we didn't. And so we were able to keep moving. And so we're cognizant of that. I think for me, the biggest surprise we knew our field sites would keep moving forward, and the subs and everyone stepped up. It was really how effective we could operate remotely. We've gotten pushed from a lot of people over the years that, they wanted to be able to work from home and be more flexible. Construction's not a real forward-looking, taking on R&D and trying new things. And I think it's kind of forced us into that. And I've been pleasantly surprised at how successful we've been at working remotely, and how we've been able to get that done. As I said, it's suboptimal. I don't think we can operate long-term. We miss out on the people interactions. But we certainly have been pretty successful in working remotely. And so that's probably been the biggest surprise for me, is how we've been able to get that going and move forward, and continue to move. And I hope we're back to work at some point soon, or at least back in the offices. But we've been pretty successful so far.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've been working from home for a decade, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But man, everybody's chomping at the bit to just go see people and get together again. Anybody else want to comment quick on last 8 weeks?
I would add into Will's comments about how successful and surprisingly so we have been working from home. If anything, I think our productivity feels like it's gone up a little bit. I think people are working longer days. That will have a long-term price to pay. I think moving forward, we'll do more of this, but a concern that I have, and I think Will does too, is a lot of what we do is learned from people around us and the projects and the other situations that are around you that you learn by osmosis. And working from home, we're going to miss that level of sort of an educational opportunity, especially for our younger staff, people just starting out, and help advance their careers by learning those things. We got to figure out a new way to get that to them.
I want to hear too from Corbin. When this hit, like, what was your life? What happened? It had to have been a complete shock. It was a shock to all of us. I was actually at South Padre in a condo when I found out, and I'll never forget that moment as long as I live. It felt like a 9/11 moment. But Corbin, what were the first few days like?
Yeah, it was insane. I mean, the Austin and Travis County in the city of Austin, where we live, actually declared an emergency a week before the state or the country did. So that was sort of they did it first, and everyone was kind of like, what's happening? They canceled South by Southwest Festival, which was a $400 million giveaway of money. And then that kind of got people thinking, wow, this is serious. And then once the governor and president, a week later, both declared emergencies, all of a sudden we got thrust into, we did one as a city as well. And it really just turned life upside down. And I think one of the more surprising things about this from the mayor perspective has just been to see the sort of psychological and mental effects it's had on people to, A, be isolated, and B, just how passionately and deeply held their beliefs are, wherever they may be, between the sort of the safety, health side of the spectrum versus the I'm worried about my job and my money side of the spectrum. When you see employees at companies or employees in the city or residents, they have very strong, they fit somewhere on that spectrum, and they are entrenched in that spot. And in any organization, whether it's a company or a government, they're all in the same rooms together, and they're all in the same, some cases, households together. And that doesn't mix real well because some of the views are just very much far apart. And that having to deal with that and make decisions about that and every little ripple effect has been interesting to watch.
I don't envy you in your job. I got to tell you that. When I heard South by Southwest was canceled, I couldn't fathom the amount of capital lost that would have come into that area. That's just bananas. Tyler, anything to add on the last 8 weeks?
Yeah, I think it's Will hit it on the head that it's been kind of surprising in a positive way, the resiliency that's been shown throughout our organization specifically and within the subcontractors. There was a real opportunity to kind of tuck your head in the sand, wait to see what happens instead of chasing, being aggressive and staying active and moving and proactive with projects, as well as going and working from home. Our field staff's been fantastic, and I think that's been the same across the board for most folks that I talk to, with being resilient, taking on the challenges as they come. There's a lot of ambiguity day to day with the restrictions, the requirements, and the back to work orders, et cetera. But being flexible, it's been pretty surprising and encouraging from our side.
That's fantastic. I got to tell you, out of 40 webinars, 30 of them, everybody's been really positive, and I love it. And the other 10 is probably being more realistic, but I do love the positivity, so I appreciate that. So in terms of how this event's going to go, I've got a group of questions here. The first group I want to attack is what's going on the ground with the construction industry before we get into what's going to happen in the future. And I think that's where most people that logged on, that's where their minds are at. What's it going to be like going forward, and what's the pipeline look like? What's the availability of capital, all that stuff. But let's start with life on the ground. And, I don't know if Tyler or Will, you're the best to kind of start in on this, but what's it like on your job site? Has there been an impact on labor, materials? Is social distancing causing timing issues? Like, can the electricians be in with the drywall people, or do all of these things now everything takes longer? What's kind of life like on the ground?
Kyler, why don't you take that? I think you're probably closer to it than I am.
Yeah, it's been there's a pretty large disparity between the way that people are approaching this. So obviously the first was the unknown, right? People were scared if there was an opportunity where somebody would have been quarantined, whether they were self-quarantined or we were very particular with the way that we communicated why somebody was home. Because if an individual leaves a job site, it starts this chain of events of fear of, have I been infected? Should I go ahead and go home? And then we have to chase that all the way through to lost production. So it's been a challenge. The cities are approaching this different. So multiple projects across multiple municipalities, the public in their fear, the watchdogs from the windows, I guess is what you would call them, that peer out into the construction sites and say that I saw 2 people inside of 6 feet. We've had several visits from code enforcement just checking on, hey, we think we saw somebody inside of 6 feet, which is funny to think about from 170 yards away, that somebody can make that determination. But, again, it's realizing that they have something to do. The police officers don't want to be there. The code enforcement don't want to technically do this either. So we're doing everything we can to promote this positive image outwards, that we're being proactive. We're not doing the on-site, inside close quarters meetings. We're taking them outside. We're taking phone calls, not turning them into meetings, letting them be phone calls and emails for that matter. And really, it's funny. We've taken a turn over the past 2 weeks where things have calmed down from an on-site perspective to an extent where we've leveled off. People are getting used to the requirements. As you alluded, the electricians working in close quarters. There's some opportunities where that's almost impossible with a helper electrician scenario or a plumber helper scenario. It's being deliberate, right, from a safety standpoint of how we approach all those tasks and making sure that we're placing the proper importance and protocols in place where we do put people inside of that risk, or they put themselves in that risk. So there's a lot of ambiguity out there. And I think as we continue to be communicative and open and transparent, it's going to continue to degrade that ambiguity that's existing.
The only, I would add as maybe a industry spokesperson, I'm seeing that across the construction industry. Corbin and I were very actively involved through our, affiliation with the state AGC, with working with contractors across the state. And there were some studies that came out that said construction sites were going to be similar to like meatpacking plants and senior citizen centers, that were going to have these huge infection spikes and be hotbeds of infections. And that just hasn't happened. And I think all construction and subcontractors have taken a very proactive approach to this. So, we've been very lucky that, we were deemed an essential business, but equally as lucky that we just haven't had mass outbreaks on construction projects. They just haven't manifested themselves. So I think it's a testament to all construction companies taking this very seriously.
I agree, Will. We've got a lot of projects going on. We have one in Dallas that had a COVID outbreak. A subcontractor came on site, started feeling badly during the day. It was handled appropriately. The team was isolated, sent home. Get to someone's earlier point, they've got a couple of weeks off. While that's not helping the schedule very much right now, it's keeping a lot of people healthy. Some of the other kind of downstream things we've seen is a small limitation on some materials, especially on the luxury end. Things coming out of Europe have been a little harder to get to the site. And light fixtures. We're starting to see some impact on some of those, especially in the specialty kinds. But overall, technology and the use of it in the construction sites has helped a lot. We don't have to have people go out and walk jobs as much anymore. We have somebody from the construction company or the subs sending live videos, and they can talk through it and look around and see things. It's been really pretty effective.
That's actually pretty cool. That's the first thing that you all have said that sounds to me like it might save time and money. So, Will, all of the stuff you just talked about for 5 minutes, if I'm the developer, that sounds like my bill just went up or my cost just went up. How are you handling all that sort of?
Well, I would say, anything we can do to make things more efficient is going to reduce cost. If you talk about this moment in time, in the last 8 weeks, if we talk specifically to cost, I would say, and this is Texas. I can't speak to other parts of the country, and talking to my counterparts in other parts of the country, they haven't seen quite as big a drop in pricing. But in Texas right now, we're seeing about a 12 to 15% drop in construction prices over the last 8 weeks. So we've bid 7 or 8 school projects, and in each one of those in the last 4 or 5 weeks has been at least 10%. And we bid one this week that was 18% under budget with the low bidder. And there were 3 or 4 folks at that low number. So construction pricing is down. That's not a material issue. It's a manpower issue. In Texas, you've got a lot of general contractors and subcontractors that have moved into this market. It's very competitive. We all have short our memories. We remember what 2008 was. And so I think people are trying to make sure they can maintain their workforce. They're hopeful that we're going to come out of this fairly quickly. And so they're trying to pick up work. And so we've seen this short-term drop in pricing. I don't know how long it's going to last. I don't think we're going to rebound and bounce back up to where they were, 2 months ago. I don't think we're going to see that by the end of the year. I think we'll see some recovery, but not much. But yeah, we've seen a pretty stark drop as it relates to the efficiencies and creativity around, anything we can do to overcome our manpower shortage that makes us more efficient and allows something, Jess that has an architect that can see 5 sites in a day virtually versus having to see, 4 in a week because he has to, or she has to drive out to those different sites. And that actually reduces cost, right? And so, it allows us to maintain or improve margin and pass that along to owners, where possible. So a lot of innovation coming out of this. We'll see what sticks and what doesn't, but we're taking a hard look at that.
Yeah, that's going to be a challenge.
I would say to Will's point about the projects bidding a little lower, I think that's true in hard bid jobs right now. If you're in a negotiated position with a selected GC, I think everybody's being cautious right now and maintaining those budgets. They're not showing much discount on that right now because there's just not much predictability about it.
100%. If you're budgeting a price that on a project that might be, so if you're a developer listening to this or an owner or an equity and you're thinking, hey, I could go out and my budget for a project that's starting in the fall, you should book that in. I would be cautious on that. I do think when you actually bid the project with the subcontractors, you're going to see a price reduction, but it's too early to tell 6 months, 12 months from now where this is headed. I have an opinion about that, and we can maybe share that later. But I mean, I think it's hard to guess on that right now.
Very much so.
Yeah, that it depends answer we seem to be getting a lot lately. Let's get to Corbin for a minute. And you have a different view, both the hats you wear, right? So you've got your AGC hat or ACG hat, and then you've got your mayor hat. What's your view of construction from your office right now?
From the city perspective, a lot of our projects that are in our city that are private are moving forward just fine. The ones that are public-private that are partnerships have been moving forward. There have been a couple of them that had like a month or two, some of the timelines pushed back, but they're still going. Everyone is having to revisit the public projects, infrastructure projects to see, because now we're starting to look at budgets, municipal budget. And in Texas, most of the municipalities and counties do their budgets in the August-September timeframe. That's coming up pretty quickly. And most of our budgets are based on property tax as well as sales tax. And obviously the sales tax numbers are starting to come in. And the last batch we got had 1 week of COVID. The next batch is going to have 4 weeks of COVID. And the sales tax is down considerably. And the AV is flat and in some cases down. So you're having to make decisions about your local budgets and setting your tax rates based on what revenue you have available. At the same time, you're looking at how are we going to cut the costs, how are we going to handle the people part of the equation, and do we need to move projects around? And some of the projects, it's based on how they're funded. Are they funded with bonds? Are they, what's that going to? So there's a lot of things this summer that cities and counties are going to be having to make decisions. But I would tell you that when I was in the legislature back after 9/11 and the recession started hitting all the states, one of the best things Texas did was the other 49 states raised their taxes to make up the shortfall. and Texas actually cut their spending. And granted, the state's a different like this as a government sends a message to the private sector. So it's an opportunity for governments to send a good message to the private sector.
I want to stay on you, Corbin, because I think we're halfway through, and I really want to get to what the future brings for us. So I've got a question here for you. We've seen some friction between local and state responses. Do you see this continuing in Texas, and how is the construction industry responding to that?
At first, there was a lot because, again, this was new to all of us, pandemics. Texas is no stranger to disasters and emergencies, but usually there are hurricanes, floods, and fires, and usually it's the coastal counties that are very familiar with protocols and disasters and how you have to work at different levels of government and work across party lines. The rest of the state is not as familiar with that, and so this has been a crash course for a lot of elected officials that had very little training for that. I do think you'll see the legislature respond to that. There's already talk about changing some of our statutes so that they're more predictable and more definitively clarify the lines between county, city, and state in these situations. It's gotten better. The work together has gotten better as it's gone on, but it's been a learning process for all of us. I think the construction industry has done a fantastic job having to deal with a patchwork of various initial different types of stay-at-home orders. And then once those got consolidated, they were still having to deal with differing kind of bureaucratic hurdles, I would say, at the local level on protocols, and eat up a lot of time trying to figure those out and deal with the sort of law enforcement that's enforcing them. But the communication between the private sector and public sector and the speed of the communication has been fantastic. So I think the problems we had along the way were getting fixed. Sometimes it took a week to fix them, but most of them were getting fixed.
We had talked before we got on this call about the people's attitude toward the virus, and some folks being, let's get back to work, and other folks being, I'm not comfortable doing that. And I don't know about Texas as much as I do about my home state, but we've seen it go directly down party lines, depending on which side of that they fall on. What does your constituency look like? Are they get back to work? Are they a mix, or what's the?
It's a mix. Mood? Our city is purple. It's literally half and half. I will say, though, that our city management took an anonymous survey of the employees, and there was some party line fallout, but there was also some gender differences, some differences based on whether you had other people in your home that were elderly or asthmatic or things like that. So it wasn't as cut and dry as party. One of the interesting things I've experienced is I've been on several conference calls, governmental conference calls, where in some cases, or meetings, web meetings, where there were all men in the meeting. And then I've been on calls, like, for example, our city management is mostly women, actually. Our city manager is a woman, our assistant manager is a woman. And one of the biggest factors in all of this has been schools and childcare. And I've been surprised that when I'm on meetings or calls where there's women and men in them, that's one of the first issues that comes up. And when you're on a call with just men, I've been on calls where it never came up. And I would literally have to raise my hand and say, about it. So, and to have workers, you got to have people taking care of the kids. And so it's been an interesting, you can call it what it is. I'm just reporting the news. Okay. That's the way the calls went. And I think it's been helpful having various perspectives because you don't think about some things sometimes.
Yeah, I would jump in there. We were looking at going back to work in the offices next Tuesday, and we've actually pushed that off till sometime in June. We haven't set a hard date, but we did an internal survey, and it really kind of divided out, I would say roughly a third, and a third. A third of our folks were like, yeah, I'm ready to get back right now. Let's go. If I looked at that group demographically, it was young, single, and really felt like there was a certain amount of, yeah, I don't have anything to worry about. Let's get this thing going. The third, on the other end of the spectrum, were really had more responsibilities to other people in their household, whether that was kids or a spouse or a parent, and they're looking at things a little differently. And they're like, I have no interest in coming back to work right now because I put someone else at my family at risk, or I can't take care of my kids. And that third in the middle was like, I'll do it, but, and they wanted to know what the assurances were, and they had some concern. So that it seems to be dividing out that way, much more so than a political. It's really your personal circumstances, and that's the perspective that people are taking on a back to work scenario. Now, related to reopening certain things, it may look a little differently, but back to work, I think people are really putting their own personal position in front of everything.
We did a similar thing. Well, we did some surveys, and we found ours generationally segmented. My generation, with sadly now the dinosaur group, has more of a tendency to go back to the office. Younger people less so in our profession. But that underlying thing that's driving it all is your situation, taking care of an older parent, small children. All of those things factor in. We actually went back to work this week, optionally, and the floors are fairly empty still. There's very, very few people left still in our office buildings today. And that's not even a global thing. That's a few that we rolled out as test cases with some new procedures and things like that. So I think it's going to come down to the culture of your business and where you are and what your personal situation is.
We're going to do our own poll of our own audience. So I just put up a poll now that says, are you ready to get back to work, restaurants and events? First answer, yes. Second answer is maybe. And the last one's not yet comfortable with the risk. Okay, we got to talk about probably the meat and potatoes of this event. And I'm going to start with Will. What does the pipeline look like for the construction industry going forward?
Great question. So, and I've talked to a lot of contractors. I've looked at our data 100 different ways of, construction is a lagging indicator of the market, right? So, we have a backlog of work that's already under construction. And if most contractors are like us, we're in record backlog. And so April and May were two of our biggest months in our history. May's about done, but I anticipate it being that way. And I think June, July, and August will follow a trend with that. Most contractors have a backlog of, a solid backlog of 8 to 12 months, and then it starts to drop off fairly precipitously. So the next 6 months look pretty good for construction companies as it relates to, putting work in place. Sales, I think there's a big question mark there. Public sector work, schools, we do a lot of schools. We're seeing a lot of that, but the competition levels change. We've gone from bid list of 5 or 6 people to 16 or 18. And you got to be really competitive. So we're seeing a downward compression on margins. We have a number of private sector projects that have pushed off for 4, 5, 6 months to fall. And so I don't know if those projects are going to move forward or not. And that's a big question mark, Todd, is what are we going to see there? My personal opinion is I think 21 is going to be pretty bleak for construction companies. I think that we're not going to see this rebound. I don't think it's going to be a V-shaped in any way, shape, or form. I think we're going to there's a big disparity, and there's a lot of question marks with money and developers. And I think that, odds are it's going to be very, very competitive, especially in Texas, because there's been a lot of new contractors and a lot of new subcontractors. I think you're going to see a lot of competition. And if you see a 20 or 30 or percent drop in projects, those contractors are going to be competing and really beating each other up to get work. So I think we're good for the next 6 months, and construction companies are going to be fine. Next year is going to be a big question mark, but if I were guessing, I'd say most contractors are going to be off 20 to 30% on rental.
We're seeing numbers that might support that, Will. The Architectural Billing Index has been down for a couple of months now, record downs. The Billing Index, for those of you that don't know, is a ratio of architectural billings compared to the previous month. So we're significantly down. As a matter of fact, It's even worse. It's the worst. Last month was the worst month since they've started keeping the thing down 28%, or down to not 20%, down to 28, 50 being even. So it's a significant decrease that shows billings coming way down, moving forward, which contractors typically lag 6 months behind us. That doesn't bode well for 2021.
Those are scary statistics. Jess, I'm assuming you're having conversations with these developers. What are the conversations going? Is it just I don't know, or are they fairly certain? Like Will said, this isn't going to be a V or a U, or there's maybe this longer tail on our recession.
I think there's a trough, to be sure. We're seeing, and I've talked to a couple of them. One office building in San Antonio. We discussed whether to stop construction. The answer ultimately ended up being no, that wasn't the right move for his situation. We have other projects that are in design that have stopped. The discussion goes a lot like this. What's the new office building going to be? Are we still going to need the same square footage? We don't know. A vaccine and therapeutic treatment changes the situation a lot, but I think the bigger concern there is this work from home ability. Second on your list of expenses running a business typically is your real estate. So can you change the way your real estate looks? And we're working with a lot of clients on that right now to maybe change the mix of what's in that space. And that'll drive how much space, more or less, mostly less. And then we have some developers peeling back. We're doing a 12-story office building in North Texas here that's probably going to come out of this thing a 9 or 10-story office building with less parking. So the job will still go. I think it'll get a little smaller. There's just a lot of uncertainty right now, so people are kind of pulling back. The other side of that is some of them are saving their bullets and not building anything right now and looking at land and land acquisition, time to maybe go shopping and pick up some less expensive dirt, especially in a couple of months when people may be in a little bit more financial straits and looking to turn some dirt to keep some cash in their pocket.
It's interesting you say that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, that pivots to really the biggest gap we have right now. And if you go back to February, let's say January, February, there was a pretty small gap between buyers and sellers. If you had money and you were selling a project, or if you were a developer, that gap was fairly small. The gap today is significant. What sellers believe their properties are worth, or what they want to get the deal done for, is a lot different than what a buyer thinks they're willing to pay. Sellers remember December of 2019. Buyers remember December of 2008. And so that's what they're looking at. And that gap is very wide right now. And I think they're both gambling. And one group's gambling that this is going to come back and they're going to get their sales price. And the other group's gambling that this thing's going to get worse and they're going to get their buy price. And until one of them gets proven right, nothing's going to happen. And I think that's where we are right now, is we're just in this waiting period to see what happens so that the buyers and sellers can get right on their number.
Yeah, and it also depends, Will, a lot on their cash position too, because capital right now is tightening up really, really firm. Money's cheap as it's ever been, but getting it is a little different problem right now. People that have cash maybe want to sit on it, or you have to have just a deal with a bullet on it to get money in it. Debt and capital being a little different. Both are tough right now.
I just did a capital markets this morning with some very high-end people that said there's plenty of money out there. But then when you ask them what you said, just what projects? Well, it has to be the right project. Well, those are two very different things. I want to get back over to Corbin here because you brought up a point, Jess. How long are we going to be in this? And I'm not saying Corbin's a scientist, but I'm willing to bet he spends more time thinking about, from the city perspective, how long are we going to be in these various ordinances, and is there going to be a fall resurgence? Is this a long-term thing? Are schools reopening with completely different layouts and seating arrangements and things? So can you share anything with us? Well,
From a government standpoint, when it started, our governor was more sort of letting the locals, and it was a sort of a battle for several days between the county judge, the big 15 county judges, and the governor as to who was the shutting down. And ultimately, it fell on the county judges because the governor didn't want to do that. So the county judges were the ones doing the shutting down. That led to a lot of discretion with the local officials, and that created another set of problems. But in a state like Texas, where you have 254 counties, there were dozens of counties that didn't have a case and still don't have very many cases, versus some counties that had lots of cases. So it made sense, but it was problematic. And then as it got more to the reopening, the local officials. So how long does it last? I mean, I don't really know. And I think there's this thought that, when you watch all these curves and how the distancing and the staying at home has done what it was supposed to do in Texas, in the sense that, hindsight, it did keep our hospital ICUs from being overrun. And right now we do have hospital capacity and ICU capacity. We get daily reports on how many beds are available, how many are taken up. That's the one reason these things were put in place, because we were flying blind. We didn't have enough tests to know who had it and who didn't. We didn't have enough tests to actually actively test people and find out how much it had been there. So I think someone referred to it as the 14th century method of stay inside your house, because we don't know who has it. And that did save the hospital system. But when you start talking about going back into the fall and the winter, and what antiviral drugs will be there, what vaccines will be there, we don't know. The good news is, though, for the most part, is if you keep 6 feet away from someone, or if you mask within 6 feet of someone and you're not touching your face, those things alone, you can pretty much keep yourself from getting it. Now, if you're forced in a situation where you have to be around people, that's another story.
You froze up there at the very end. I think we got the gist of it.
Well, my last sentence was, we know a hell of a lot more now than we did in March.
That's good to hear. That's fantastic. Gentlemen, we got 15 minutes left, and I've got probably 10 questions in the chat room. Will, are you okay with we just fire into these chat questions?
Yeah, why not? Let's mix it up.
So one question I liked here is, what are you hearing in the healthcare sector as far as construction goes?
That's Jess's forte. Jess, why don't you, and HKS's anyway, why don't you guys take it?
We're seeing a lot of activity there. We have not seen any projects shut down that are of significant size. We're not seeing extra money in it. I think that is sort of business as usual compared to some of the other fields like hospitality, or even venues, perhaps. So the healthcare market seems to be going strong. We've done some things to help with the COVID thing. We've looked at schemes to turn hotels into temporary hospitals. We've looked at all kinds of things to help out with emergency rooms where needed. We've been really busy with that in Chicago. So like a lot of our brethren in the architecture business, everybody's trying to figure out a way to do some built solutions to respond quickly.
Are those things being built, or are they still in just planning stages?
Some are actually being built right now. I know the Chicago team has been hard at it. Just like in Dallas County, where they had a team come in, set up the convention center as emergency beds, and the Javits Center in New York. Those things were quick emergency responses that our architects and contractors and our industry helped out getting done quickly. And the cities too, by the way, by working with them on permitting and processes that would maybe have slowed those things down. It's really important that the municipalities weighed in on those to help enable those kinds of unusual approaches.
So that'll be Corbin's third year. You'll be in trying to get permitting done faster. Gotcha. Okay, Dan Stone's got a question here. I'm not sure that y'all can answer it because it's a deep question, but I do want to I do think it's important because it addresses labor. We were preparing to announce a $2.4 billion project in Austin. Does Austin have the workforce available to support a large-scale four-year at this program at this moment, or would it be beneficial to wait? So you can even expand on that. Other markets, what's the labor situation like?
Well, maybe I'll give you a pre-COVID and then a post-COVID's back to the, I don't know, a $2.4 billion. There's a couple of large projects that have been announced and we're starting in Central Texas, Austin. The Austin labor market has been extremely tight. I don't know, waiting or moving forward makes a big difference. I mean, those projects and those big mega projects take a lot of subcontractor manpower. And there's been a real compression on that in Central Texas and in Austin in particular. As it relates to going forward, I don't, another big project like that, I don't know how that, quite honestly, waiting or moving forward, from a manpower perspective, how that would look. I mean, quite honestly, it would probably depend on the type of project. If it's a $2.4 billion data center that has, you can cram a lot of cost into equipment, then it's one thing, and it's a little less labor intensive. If it's a very, very, labor intensive project, if you're wanting to do it in a schedule that's just very unrealistic and very, very short fused, you're going to have a tough time getting people interested in it. So you're going to have to look at being very honest and realistic about your construction schedule and your price, and just coming at it from a really honest and straightforward perspective. We've chased a couple of very large projects in Austin like that, and have been involved in a couple. And I would say if everyone can be really straightforward and direct and honest about what they're trying to accomplish, and people will listen to the subcontractors about what they need, it can be successful. But wanting to do a $2.4 billion project and do it in 24 months is probably not realistic. You're going to have to be realistic about the time frame and the labor available. So I don't know if that answered your question. It's a bit of a, it depends on the circumstances, but it's a very tight market. Even with projects getting delayed and some compression, it's still really tight.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of work in Austin right now, and some of it for the state of Texas, who has more work coming out even, if you hear the Facilities Commission, and then some commercial work as well. Subcontracting community has been, the topic of discussion in Austin for 5 years or 10 years almost. No one knows how it happens. I would be cautious on the level of finish. If it's a really high-end level of finish and you're looking for zero detailing and things like that, the labor force is going to be tough to get on a job that size. If it's sort of common level of finish, it's kind of straightforward office building stuff, then the market will probably respond. But to Will's point, I don't think it would happen in a hurry, or I don't see a huge discount coming for that right now, especially in the Austin market.
Interesting. All right, we're going to move on to another question here. Luis, what do you think about panelized construction systems and I suppose to that modular construction systems? I just saw in the news a modular apartment building was just delivered recently. Is that something that could maybe solve some of these COVID issues because people aren't working in such tight quarters, or they can be at least in a bit more controlled environment?
I'll give you my 2 cents. I think from a field perspective, yes. I think we've done some modular panelized projects. We've looked at others. They've been more of a time savings issue than a cost savings, scenario. The flip side to that is you're going to have to manufacture them in a plant, in a manufacturing facility, which seems to be a bigger hotbed for infections. So if you're talking about COVID-19 infections, I don't know that manufacturing those pieces and components in a factory right now are going to help you a whole lot. In the long term, it might, once they can get a hold of that. But we seem to be seeing more infections in close quarters and plants. Now, if it was robotic and fully manufactured, yeah, maybe. But I just think globally for the construction industry, anything that'll allow you to manage the labor crisis we've faced, and this is going to be short term being a year, 2 years, 3 years, but we're going to continue to see growth in Texas, and I think we're going to need to find ways to manage the labor issues. So once we get out of this short term issue, it's going to continue. So I hope that answers the question. I don't know that moving things to a factory right now in this moment is better. Makes
sense. I got another good one here. we're gonna kind of have to stop going to questions and go to final thoughts here in a minute. But this one's about multifamily. What does the future of multifamily look like? I've thought at the very beginning, because I own a high-end luxury building, I'm like, this is the end. This is the end of the multifamily run that's been going on across the country for 10 years. So anybody want to pick up on where are we at with apartments and housing?
I'll say this: the Architectural Building Index ranked the decline in billings between three categories. One's institutional, the other one commercial, and then the other one residential, i.e., larger scale residential, not single family houses. That residential piece was in between institutional and office built and commercial. So the billing index is down on that. I have one potential client that's looking at building a building, a high-rise for rent product here in North Texas that they've just put on the shelf for a while. Incidentally, that's the client that thought they might go shopping for some dirt. So they're not parking it entirely, but they're not rushing to market with it either. So we'll see.
Let me ask you an architecture question about high rises. We're used to cramming 15 people into an elevator to get to our floor because we want to get home or get to work in the morning.
Right.
What are you all thinking in the architecture world? Are you talking bigger cabs or more elevators? What's the talk there?
If you went with 6 feet between people in an elevator, you only get 2 people in a typical elevator. That's an all-day exercise to get people up 20 stories. That's a challenge. So right now you see the blue tape on the floors in the elevator. Everybody stand in your corner, and we're trying to do one-way traffic. I think the architectural impact will be greater use of stairs in building, maybe designing better stairs between floors, and some lobby runs, short shuttle runs, maybe a software scenario where you can get in multiple banks. One bank elevator is going up, one bank elevator is going down, and you do one-way traffic that way. It's all going to be slower. We'll figure it out. I think this comes back to a vaccine helps us a lot.
Yeah, and we're working through with a few owners now that have office buildings. The old destination dispatch process is coming back into play, and we're exploring that for a few owners. So reducing the number of stops per floor and grouping passengers per destination, right? So it'll reduce the amount of ancillary people in an elevator. There's 4 people going to level 4 and 6 to level 6. It'll group those destinations appropriately. So that's part of helping. Touch-free fixtures are part of it. We're chasing down these scenarios with all the owners. We've worked with a couple Californian developers that are very ahead of the curve with chasing down touchless fixtures, reducing the amount of touch points within the high traffic areas. So the destination dispatch for the elevator specifically is something we're chasing hard.
That all costs money, though. What's the price difference?
It does come at a premium. It comes at a premium, and really at that point you have to leverage what's my end product going to be, right? Do I want to have the convertibility for the space? Will it appeal to the highest bidder? Will I get an anchor tenant, et cetera? Yeah. And that depends on if you have an anchor tenant that demands it. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. It is a premium.
Yeah, stairs and elevators are holes in buildings, and if you know the BOMA guidelines, you don't get to do much with a hole in a building. So they're just expensive pieces of overhead. We're also looking at even elevator marshals, somebody in the lobbies touching buttons for people, things like that. There's a lot that's not solved yet.
When you said marshals, I heard police. We're talking about as an elevator person. Maybe it's a combined job.
He's not an officer of the law, but he's maybe a commander in the lobby to get you where you're going.
Well, gentlemen, we are low on time. 6 minutes left. I want to just do a little Hollywood Squares here. And I'm sure there's stuff we didn't cover. I'm looking at my list of questions. There's stuff we didn't cover. I'm looking at the chat room. There's stuff we didn't have time to cover. So I want you to address anything that we missed. Final thoughts, first of all. What's your final thoughts? But also if there's anything we missed that you wanted to get addressed. And I'll just start back with Tyler quick.
The big thing with market sectors, I saw a couple people ask it, is to know that the projects under construction are moving forward, right? So those things are happening. The big things that we're anticipating we may not have touched on is the pre-construction side. There is a shift, and I'm sure Jess can say this as well. there's a shift in design, and people are being cognizant of how we're going to approach this and prepare with things that are already in pre-construction and development. So there are sectors that are healthy. The e-commerce section Will mentioned me earlier this morning, it's healthy. So the outlook is relatively good, not to give the over-optimistic view, but as we continue to be, at the end of the day, we're problem solvers in the construction world, right? All of us are. So it lends itself to us being successful and finding unique ways to stay moving forward.
That's great insight. Corbin, final thoughts, and was there anything we missed on that you feel like we should touch?
Well, I just feel like, as we come out of this, we got to come out of it. It's going to require us being around each other more at a time when we don't have all the solutions yet. And I think people have been really good about distancing more. I don't really like the term social distancing, because really what you're doing is you're physically distancing. That's what you're doing. And I think they've been good about using sanitizer and things like that. In fact, I've probably used more hand sanitizer in the last 60 days than probably my entire life combined. I'm actually I wish we could change some of people's mentalities about wearing masks. I think that in America, like, freedom, liberty, independence, like, Americans have this kind of, there are some folks that think wearing a mask is like weak, or you're scared, or you're self-conscious about how it looks. But I wish we could switch that to it's actually being smart, unselfish, and you should be confident, because that we're going to have to be around each other. And that's the way we're going to keep the numbers down. And that's the way we're going to be able to get the economy going faster.
Yeah, some people are feeling really about maybe their rights being infringed on by being told to wear a mask or whatever. That's a tough haul, but I'm with you. Let's all get together and get over this. All right, Jess.
It kind of froze up on me, so I didn't hear you. But I remember remember when seat belts were an issue, and everybody thought that you can't tell me to wear a seat belt. Who wakes up today and even has a thought about that? And this is a much bigger deal, actually. So that's where I hope people's mentality gets.
I don't want to be wearing masks 30 years from now. Please.
I don't think we will, but I don't care if you wear your seatbelt. I'll put mine on. That's the difference. If I wear a mask, it's not about me getting it. It's about helping keep you from getting something I might have. So it's just being polite to your neighbors. In our business, the crystal ball is not clear yet. We don't know the solutions. We have some thoughts on how to do things, how to change up the workspace. We're sharing that out with some of our clients. Everybody said we're still guessing at this right now. We think we know some great solutions moving forward, given the current design parameters. But I've got to believe that this is going to get better with time, with treatment, with vaccines, with understanding and knowledge. We will get where we need to be, both in terms of a medical situation, a real estate situation, design challenges, and construction challenges. There's not a more innovative and responsive community in the world than here in the United States, and we can put together some great minds and solve all these problems. Each solution is going to be unique, and that's why we're all in this business, because each one's a little different.
Corbin, Jess is coming for your job. Speaking like a politician, I love it.
No, he's not.
Well, Will, can you take us home?
Guess what, Jess? You can have it, man.
I'm what they call unelectable.
I'll two comments. I will say, one, I think what's been interesting in the last 8 weeks, there's been a real civics lesson for at least folks in Texas, I think for the country, right? Corbin and I talk about this because we're kind of legislative, political geeks, I guess, to a certain extent. And that's part of what I serve on the TBB, on the AGC, state AGC. 8 weeks ago, 10 weeks ago, 95% of the country didn't have a clue what a county judge did. Today, they know. And elections matter. And I think that people understand that the county judge in a time like this has a lot of power. And now they know who their county judge is, and they understand what that means. And I think people are going to pay attention to who they're electing and how who they're electing could affect them down the road. And so that's been a good thing. I think we've paid more attention to kind of the civically what's going on and governmentally what's happening. And there's a much broader awareness today than there was 8 weeks ago, 10 weeks ago. So I think that's a good thing. The other thing is, and I'm, there's a lot of money, and I think the United States is going to become a beacon for, and this may not be a year or 2 or 3, but I think in the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to see the United States really taking the forefront. I think there's going to be a lot of onshoring of certain things. I don't think we're going to onshore tennis shoes and t-shirts, but I do think you're going to see a lot of critical manufacturing coming back to the United States. I think there's going to be a big push for that. I think there's going to be people that see the United States as a real opportunity for stability, regardless of what might be happening in Washington or what your opinions are. I just think as a country, we provide a lot of stability. And I think that, the EU is going to come out of this in a really, really tough place. I think China is going to come out of this in a tough place. And I think people are going to be looking at the United States down the road. And I think for those of us in construction and architecture and development, it's going to be a great place to be. We just got to get through this, and we will. There's going to be some uncertainty, but I'm very, very optimistic about where the next 3, 5, 8 years, what that looks like for us. So, and I think if we can keep our eye on the big picture long term, we'll get through these, the nits and gnats we're dealing with now and manage our way through it.
Will, in 40 webinars, I haven't heard anybody say it so well. I hadn't thought of what things are like everywhere else where they're worse. That's a pretty cool take, and I do think to both your points, you and Jess, we will rise above. It's a great way to end this great event, gentlemen. This was fantastic. I want to do it again. I got to tell you, Jess, personally, and to Tyler, I want to hear about these touchless elevator things, all the cool new gadgets that are coming out. That might be a fun 1 hour deal. I might have to put that on our to-do list. So
Absolutely.
Thanks for your insight on those things.
You got it.
Hey, everybody have a great Memorial Day.
Yes, sign out, and I will leave the chat room open for a couple minutes, and I will flash through everybody's contact info one more time. So speakers, you can sign out, say goodbye, and I'll just kind of keep the screen going for another minute or two.
What were the results of the poll?
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.